Before I ran for Congress, I wasn't elected to anything in the first half century of my life, but I prosecuted war profiteers in Iraq for several years. Thank you, how horrible that war was for everyone involved, including the unmentioned hundreds of thousands of Iraqi victims of that war, and how it, in the end, we now know, served no purpose whatsoever except to break an entire country and plunge it into utter chaos. So yes, that's correct. A $6 billion no-bid contract went to Halliburton to buy oil at about $1 a gallon and sell it to our troops at about $10 a gallon. That was one of the cases that I worked on, actually. So I ran in 2006 for Congress, but I ran as an anti-war candidate before that was fashionable. I have to say that Tom Hayden was an inspiration to me when I was running for Congress. And it's an honor just to be in the same vicinity as Tom Hayden. He's done so much to carry forward the banners of justice, equality, and peace in America all through the years. In my district, we hadn't had a Democratic congressman since Watergate. 34 years without a single Democrat representing downtown Orlando. And when I ran for Congress, I came out as an anti-war candidate. And the party was upset with that. They said, we might actually win the seat, don't blow it for us. And I said, no, that's not what this is all about. I mean, why do you think I'm running? I'm not running on any other personal issue. This is personal to me. I spent years of my life trying to fix this problem. And I realized that if I ran for city council or if I ran for mayor, I couldn't do anything about it. But if I run for Congress, yes, I could possibly do something about that. And I won in 2008. I lost in 2010. The Koch brothers were very upset with me. They spent $5 million against me. Won in 2012. Not quite a different district. It was heavily overlapping with my old district. But I won in 2012, the biggest comeback in the history of the House of Representatives. And as soon as I get back to Congress, what do I see but another effort for what our president, at an earlier point in his life, referred to as another dumb war. Another dumb war. We are about to go to war against Syria. And I was part of that whole hubbub, and I knew about the chemical weapons and all of that. And we got one classified briefing after another after another. I can't tell you exactly what they said, but I will tell you this. As I sat through those classified briefings, I asked myself the question over and over again, where's the beef? Where is the beef? Where is the evidence, the smoking gun, that would indicate that this smoke that we saw was actually a planned attack by the Syrian government? And then you know, when they started to give us the military briefings, the generals walk in with all that salad on their uniforms in front, and they try to tell you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this other thing, we're going to do the other thing. And you quickly realize that they literally don't know what they're talking about. The so-called intelligence community is the stupid community. They're the worst ones of all. I mean, these people pretend to know everything that they pretend to know. They don't know it. They don't know it at all. And then there's the blatant misinformation that they give to you. I remember specifically, we were briefed on a particular phone call. Obviously, I can't tell you anything about the nature of the phone call because then I would be in trouble. But I will tell you that a lot of this whole scenario actually hinged on one phone call. So I said, okay, I'm assuming it's a phone call, you've got a transcript. I don't want to just hear your version of that phone call. I want to actually hear the phone call. No, we can't let you do that. I said, I'm a congressman. I have the highest level clearance you could possibly have. I want to hear the phone call. No, we can't let you do that. Why not? Because that would disclose our methods. I know what your methods are. You spy on everybody. This is what you do. You read our emails, okay? You listen to our phone calls. You look at the websites we go to. I know what your methods are. I want to listen to the phone call. No. We're not going to let you listen to the phone call. I mean, that's what it came down to. It didn't matter how many times I asked. It didn't matter who I went to see. I went to see our leadership, the other side's leadership. I went to the administration. No, we're not going to let you. Well, and you know why, right? Isn't it obvious? Because they were faking it. They were faking it. Whoa. And this is the problem that we live with. We have this giant war machine that exists only to perpetuate itself and get us into one conflict after another conflict after another conflict, endlessly and relentlessly. And they don't even let us decide. Now, this was the worst part of all, I thought. Not only the fact that their military proposals made no sense whatsoever. By the way, you can't bomb gas. That actually doesn't work too well in practice. Okay? If you bomb gas, you get more gas. It spreads over the landscapes. You can't actually bomb the gas. All you could do is bomb the people who have the gas. That's all you could possibly do. Now let's think this through, okay? Suppose we had done that. Suppose we actually bombed the people who had the gas. What would have happened next? Other people would have come and taken the gas. And now we know who those people would have been. ISIS.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So instead of seeing beheadings, if the administration had gone ahead with its plan, we'd actually be seeing ISIS deploying poison gas all over the Middle East. All right? So leaving all that aside, the thing that bothered me the most, and I think that Tom shared this feeling at the time, the thing that bothered me most is the sense that these people were making this decision for us. That we had no part in this decision. Even though it was our money and it was our blood, we had no part in this decision. And that I thought was the worst of all. And when we delegate our right to decide, what we're doing is we're giving up our humanity. It's no longer a democracy if we're saying to the generals, do whatever you want. And I got angry about this. And when I get angry, sometimes things happen. Did 7 national TV interviews in a single day. Because frankly, no one else was willing to make the case for peace. No one else was willing to do that. Democrats were cowed. Republicans, they never met a war they didn't like. So they certainly weren't going to speak up. And I went on TV and I said, no, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't going to make things better. This is going to make things worse. Think about what happens the next day after you do the bombs. You think that's the end of it? As Nancy Pelosi often says, everyone always thinks the next law is the last war, and it never is. Everyone always thinks the next attack is the last attack, and it never is. It never is. I did 40 interviews in 3 days, and you know what? Things started to change. You could see it in polls. Day after day after day, people were waking up. And when I said, it's our money and it's our blood, so it should be our decision, people actually heard that. And then the emails started and the phone calls started. Other members, Democratic and Republican, told me that the emails were coming in 100 to 1 in favor of peace. Now, you couldn't do things like that in the 60s or the 70s because they didn't have email in the 60s or the 70s. But today, you can actually galvanize public opinion and you can make the case in favor of peace. Now, I've done some interesting things in Congress, I'll tell you. As Lila was kind enough to mention, I've passed more bills, more Grayson bills and now the law of the land than any other member of Congress. 15 in 2 years. Very difficult to do when I lose on every party line vote, but I find a way to do it. I get it done, and these are good, solid, progressive bills. For instance, we had a tax break for green homes that was about to expire. I got an extension of that tax break for 2 years. I'll give you another example. We were about to allow weaponized drones to be deployed within the United States. Okay, I put an end to that. All right? Now, to show you how crazed the military-industrial complex is, the boys make their toys. They make one generation of drones, and then they make another generation of drones, which is 5 times more expensive, but it has better cameras on it, or bigger bombs, or missiles, or whatever it is that they're doing with the drones. What do they do with the first generation? They wanted to give them to the police forces here in the United States. Okay, so I said no to that, and I got the Republicans to go along with that. Thank God for the Libertarians. They have some degree of conscience in them.
Girls make them too.
What's that?
Girls make them too.
Girl makes the...
Not just boys. Girls make them too.
Oh, well, I like to refer to boys and their toys because it rhymes. It's not sexist, it rhymes. That's why I do that. Girls and their swirls, boys and their toys. There you go. So in any event, 31 amendments. I passed 31 amendments in 2 years in the House of Representatives. Again, losing on every party line vote, but finding a way, much as Ted Lieu is trying to do and doing very well. Ted is a workhorse. I'm a show horse, I'll admit. Ted works hard. He gets things done. But the bottom line is we get things done for a cause. And that's one of the things that brings all of us together today. My causes are justice, equality, and peace. This is why I fight the way that I fight. This is why Dorothy fights the way that she fights, why she founded this organization, and why it's successful. And this is what I mean by successful. You have made a life for yourselves that is a beautiful thing. I come to a place like this, I look around, I'm not just talking about the view. I'm talking about the place. I'm talking about the fact that this is a place where you respect the environment. This is a place where you have clean water, we have clean air, where people have the right to organize, where minorities are respected, where nobody is allowed to take advantage of anybody else and exploit anybody else. And for me, that's particularly poignant because I come from Coke-occupied territory in Florida, where the state legislature, even though there's more registered Democrats in Florida than there are registered Republicans, 400,000 more. Notwithstanding that, the Republicans win every statewide election, except possibly mine next year. We'll see how that one works out. Through voter suppression, through the power of money, through gerrymandering, through redistricting, whatever it might be. I'll just give you a couple examples of what it's like not to live in California, if I may. All right? One of our members of Congress voted to have offshore drilling right off the shore in Florida. He's running against me. That's one example. Another example is I paid to put on the ballot an initiative for paid sick leave, a very basic human right. Paid sick leave. In Orange County, it passed with 62% of the vote, and the Republican state legislature took it away from us and said, we're going to preempt that. You cannot pass that bill, even though the people had already spoken. They repealed it retroactively. They also, when we put an initiative on the ballot to raise the minimum wage locally, they preempted that as well. And what you see is that time after time after time, the Chamber of Commerce puts out each year a list of 20 bills that they want passed. Typically they get 19. I don't know what goes wrong with the last one. Maybe it's a little too crazy. But the fact is that in Florida, it's totally different. Entirely different. And it shows. It shows in people's everyday lives. In my district, 20% of the people in my district have no health coverage. They can't see a doctor when they're sick. In California, that would be crazy. That would be unheard of. In my district, 40%, a perfect example of discrimination, 40% of the Latinos in my district have no health coverage. 40%. All right? So what you see is that it does make a difference. Politics does make a difference in the quality of people's lives. And what you see is that in Florida, in a place like Florida, the Democrats have been demotivated. We keep nominating Democrats who are no different from the Republicans. You can't tell if they're a Republican or a Demopublican. You can't even tell the difference between them. This is what the mistake that we make over and over again. I polled our Democratic non-voters last year. I polled them and I said, why didn't you vote? I wanted to know. So we actually commissioned a poll. We spent $20,000 on this. The answer came back, we didn't vote last year. This is overwhelmingly the answer. We couldn't see any difference between the candidates. We couldn't understand how it would make any difference. Democrat, Republican, it all seems the same to us. So what you realize is that in a place like Florida, unlike a place like California, enemy is the enemy. And a club like this is the enemy of enemy. You all are the ones who ensure respect for the environment, ensure respect for the right to organize, ensure basic labor rights, a decent pay for a decent day's work, decent benefits, the idea that you can actually go to school and not be left with a lifetime of debt. You've created with the University of California an unparalleled asset for this state that puts a state like mine to shame. You have an education system that functions, that actually generates economic wealth over time, and gives people the opportunities that they would not otherwise have. Here in California, because of what you do, because of what a club like this does, here in California, people actually have a chance to be everything they can be in life. In Florida, where I'm from, people face discrimination. They face poverty. They face hunger. A lot of our children aren't even fed during the day. They don't get fed in the schools. How can they possibly study if their bellies are bothering them? They face all sorts of preventable health problems that take them out of the workforce and prevent them from being all they can be. They are enchained, enslaved by these avoidable difficulties. Here in California, you actually let people be all they can be. And you give them a helping hand when they need it. And that's something that I respect. And that's something that this club is all about. This doesn't happen by chance. In fact, there are enormous, powerful forces to prevent that from happening. What do the Koch brothers want? What do they want? They want cheap labor and wage slavery. Now you can understand why they spent $5 million to defeat me in 2010. Now it makes sense, right? Okay, so it's not just us against nobody, or us against nature, or us against the invisible hand. It's us against the people in charge. And that's why your organization is part of a machinery of conscience that protects everyone and makes it possible to actually live the American dream, to be all that you can be. So thank you very much. I will tell you about Iran. All right. You heard what I said earlier. What I said earlier weighs on my mind. The complication is this. Did anybody see me on MSNBC discussing this on Wednesday?
I can send the clip around.
Yes.
I will send the clip around.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Dorothy. You can say the same thing came up on Wednesday on the 8 o'clock show on MSNBC. The problem is this: we have completely opposite views of what happens if the deal is approved, and completely opposite views of what happens if the deal is rejected. Now, you all have your opinions. Other people have other opinions. We hear one thing from the administration, we hear another thing from the opponents, and not just slightly different, but diametrically opposed. I will give you a few examples. This is why it's difficult. If I knew what was going to happen if we approved the deal, for sure, it would be the easiest decision in the world. But what's happening now is that we hear one thing from one set of people, another thing from another set of people. So, to give you an example, what will happen if the deal is rejected? Now, I think you all, most of you anyway, think that if the deal is rejected, what will happen is that the sanctions will fall apart. The United States will be discredited in the eyes of the world. Iran will get its money, and that if it wants to, Iran can rush and go ahead and try to build a bomb. And there might be war between the United States and Iran. There might be war between Israel and Iran. It could happen in the next few months. That's what you all expect to happen if the deal is rejected. I understand that. The other side of the story is people say, if the deal is rejected, Iran still will not seek a bomb. The sanctions will remain in effect because the U.S. sanctions will remain in effect. Actually, will. If the deal is rejected, the U.S. sanctions remain in effect. Not the European sanctions, not the Asian sanctions, but the U.S. sanctions. And if the deal is rejected, some people say Iran will come back to the table and make a better deal. All right. Now, what happens if the deal is accepted? I know what you all think. What you all think is that if the deal is accepted, what will happen is that there'll be, for once, a negotiated deal rather than war, and God bless that. I'm certainly in favor of that. There'll be a negotiated agreement. Iran will get a lot of money. It's even they can't even agree on the money. You know, some people say 25 billion, some people say 155 billion. The correct number seems to be in the $50 billion range. But in any event, Iran will get a lot of money. They will continue to do what they have been doing, which frankly is against our policy, and frankly not, in my opinion, to the detriment of Middle East peace. I don't believe that Iran is doing good things in the Middle East. Let me put it that way. But that's what people think and expect will happen if the deal goes through. On the other hand, some people say that if the deal goes through, Iran will take the money, since the money is front-loaded. Iran gets the money as soon as they disable one of the nuclear facilities. They don't have to destroy it, they just disable it. They get the money, and then at that point, other people are saying what will happen is then, after they get the money, then they will build the bomb. So they get the money and they get the bomb. They throw out the inspectors. They don't even have to bother to cheat. They can do what North Korea did. They can just throw out the inspectors, go ahead and build the bomb, and we're basically 18 months away from a war. Either the United States or allies or Israel or so on, a war between Iran and the United States. How do I determine that? How do I determine which of those scenarios is correct? Well, I'll tell you. I'm going to try to educate myself. I will tell you that, in principle, I am very, very, very much in favor of a negotiation rather than war. I think that should be obvious at this point. All right? I would bend over backwards. I would certainly I would never let the perfect be the enemy of the good when you're talking about war and peace. But let's suppose hypothetically, and I discussed this on MSNBC a few days ago, hypothetically, there is a wiretapped phone call from the Ayatollah to a friend of his, and in that phone call, the Ayatollah says, here's what I'm going to do, okay? I'm going to sign this crazy-ass agreement, I'm going to get the money, and then we're going to build a bomb a year from now. All right? Now, until I actually go through the intelligence, how do I know whether that's there or not? How do I go through the intelligence when I'm here with you, or I'm back home in Orlando, and the only way you can actually see the intelligence is if you go into a cave in Washington, D.C., I can't even tell you where the cave is, and you sit there and you actually leaf through individual cables, the way that I did, for instance, with Benghazi. So I'm not ready to make my decision. I think it's safe to say that my decision will be based almost entirely on one particular variable, and that is which way is more likely to result in peace. All right, now I know it seems obvious to many of you that it's more likely to have peace if we go ahead with the agreement. And frankly, it's almost obvious to me at this point that we're going to have to go ahead with the agreement because the president has the votes. As far as I can tell, the president's not going to be relying upon my vote or Ted's vote or anybody else's vote. The president seems to have enough votes. All right, but if the opponents of the agreement who are saying this is just like what North Korea did, if the opponents of the agreement are saying this is just like what they did, they'll take the benefits of the agreement and then they'll build the bomb anyway, and we have intelligence that would actually demonstrate that, I think it would be irresponsible for me not to even bother to go and read it. But the bottom line is this. The bottom line is very simple. I want peace. That's why I ran for Congress. That's what I'm all about. I just have to try to satisfy myself about which course of action is the correct one in that regard. This is not a political decision. This is a decision about basic principles. We have committed so many atrocities against so many people. Lila mentioned the drones. I called for the testimony of the victims who came to Washington, D.C. They'd never been out of their village before. Can you imagine how jarring that was for them to come to Washington, D.C.? They'd never been on an airplane. They'd never even seen an airplane. They'd seen drones, but they hadn't seen passenger aircraft. They didn't know what that was like. And they were inside of this tube hurtling across the ocean so that they could come and tell me and a few other members what it was like to see your grandmother blown up right in your face. And, you know, only 10 years ago, the United States was the most popular foreign country in Pakistan before the drone warfare started. And now America is the least popular foreign country in Pakistan. We've gone from a 90+% approval rating, if you will, down to the low teens. That's where we are now in Pakistan. We have created all sorts of, in the name of fighting these shadows, going all around the world. We spy on everybody. We put these drones up in the air over their heads that buzz all day long and make them think they're about to die. Can you imagine what the psychological effect of that is? And we spend billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. Somebody should inform Washington D.C. that that Osama bin Laden is dead, because I don't think that the message has gotten through yet. You know, somebody should inform Washington D.C. that you don't fight terror by inducing terror. That doesn't make any sense. So, you know, that's it. I'm not going to stand in front of this group, many of whom I know and love. There's people in this audience who I can honestly say I love you. And I'm not going to stand in front of you and tell you I'm leaning this way, I'm leaning that way. But this is the decision-making process. If it turns out that this is just one big fake-out that's being perpetrated by the Iranians, I need to know that. I need to know that. And if it turns out that it is, and there's hard evidence of that, and I've appealed not only to the administration but other people who would be able to provide me with that information. If it turns out that I reach the conclusion that this is all one big fake-out, I can't support it. I can't do that. That doesn't make any sense, because that brings war closer, not further away. So, I mean, that's it. That is what I really honestly do think, and I appreciate the opportunity to explain it.